The envelope was heavy, the kind that meant to impress. Thick ivory cardstock, my name written in Madeline's delicate cursive. I turned it over in my hands twice before opening it, hesitant as if it might disappear. Inside, an invitation to her birthday dinner, hosted at La Fourchette, black tie optional, a celebration among friends and family. Family. That word clung to me longer than the gold embossing on the card. I couldn't remember the last time I'd been included in something that didn't involve babysitting or obligation. Holidays had grown quiet over the years, birthdays acknowledged with brief texts or last-minute calls. But this felt intentional, formal. A white flag of sorts. I set the invitation on the kitchen counter beside the fruit bowl that never seemed to hold more than 2 oranges these days and reached for my reading glasses. The details were precise, of course. Madeline was nothing if not meticulous. Her note at the bottom, written in a looping script, read, "Hope you can join us, would love to have you there." I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it was the closest thing to softness she'd offered in years. 2 days later, I walked into a boutique off King Street and asked the clerk to show me their Italian scarves. I picked one from Florence silk pale lilac with hand-stitched edges. It was the kind of gift that said I still cared, even when I wasn't sure what for anymore. The clerk boxed it with tissue and ribbon, and I carried it home like it was something fragile. That night, I placed the gift on the hallway table near the door next to the invitation. I stood there a long time, trying to convince myself this time might be different. The valet opened my door with a quiet, "Welcome to La Fourchette, ma'am," and I stepped out, smoothing the creases of my navy silk dress. The scarf lay folded in a gift bag beside me, its weight somehow symbolic now. More than just a birthday present. It was the last flicker of goodwill I still believed in. Inside the restaurant glowed with soft light and quiet laughter. Mahogany floors, crisp linens, and the hum of money well spent. A woman in black greeted me at the hostess stand, tablet in hand. "Name?" she asked politely. "Celeste Harden. I'm here for the Madeline Langford party." She paused, scanning the list. Her brow twitched, just barely. "Of course. Right this way." But instead of guiding me toward the main dining room, where I could already see the glint of champagne flutes and sequined dresses, she led me past it, through a narrow corridor toward a glass-paneled door that opened to the patio. The air outside was still warm, Charleston's late spring evening draped in jasmine and heat. A small table, for one, waited in the far corner, half shaded by a hedge wall. The kind of table reserved for guests without reservations, or people someone didn't want seen. "There must be a mistake," I said gently. "I was invited to the birthday dinner." She hesitated. "These were the seating instructions we were given, ma'am." Before I could say more, the door opened again, and Madeline stepped out flawless in a pale gold dress, a flute of rosé in hand. "There you are," she said brightly, as if we'd just bumped into each other at brunch. "We thought you'd enjoy the breeze out here. It's so stuffy inside with all those people." I managed to smile, though I could feel something tightening behind my ribs. "Thank you. That was thoughtful." She didn't seem to hear the edge in my voice. "We'll be just inside if you need anything." And with that, she turned and disappeared, leaving the scent of designer perfume in her wake. I sat slowly, placing the gift bag on the chair beside me. Through the glass, I spotted Grayson across the room, already seated with a plate in front of him. He didn't wave. He didn't even look my way. I reached for the water glass in front of me, but my hand paused halfway there, not from hesitation, just calculation. There was a time Grayson used to call me every Sunday. He'd be walking back from the library or waiting on laundry, his voice full of little updates. We used to talk about everything: how to cook rice without burning it, how to handle a boss with a fragile ego, whether it was smart to put your whole tax refund into a Roth IRA. We were close in a way that came from being just the two of us for a long time. When my husband died, Grayson was only 9. I remember the night after the funeral, sitting on the edge of his bed, pretending I had the strength to explain what forever meant. He didn't cry until I told him he could. And when he did, he curled into my lap like he had when he was little, and I knew then that I couldn't fall apart, not yet. Not while he still needed me whole. So I stayed whole. I worked full-time in military logistics, commuting to the base each morning and managing contract compliance for operations I couldn't talk about. I cooked every dinner, folded every shirt, and sat in the bleachers for every miserable little league game, even the ones that ended in tears. We had years like that, quiet, steady ones built on discipline and small joys. And when Grayson brought Madeline home for the first time, all smart polish and sharp questions, I did what any mother would do. I welcomed her. I let her borrow my winter coat when she didn't bring one for Thanksgiving. I helped rewrite her resume when she was laid off from her first job. I even introduced her to someone at a firm where I used to consult, and 2 weeks later she was hired. They got married at an art gallery downtown, candlelight and concrete floors. I paid for the flowers. When she walked down the aisle, I remember thinking, we're becoming something new. This is good. But it changed quickly after that. The Sunday calls came less often. Then, not at all. Family dinners happened without my knowing. Holidays turned into quick check-ins and half-promises. I was still included, technically. My name was on the Christmas list. I received the emailed updates. But the air between us had thinned, lost weight. I became a person to be managed, not loved. I never had a fight with Madeline. There was no sharp moment, no falling out. Just a slow erosion, like a tide I didn't notice until my feet were no longer touching the sand. And somehow, I let it happen. I told myself I didn't want to intrude. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law. So I pulled back, giving them space, thinking I'd be invited in again when they were ready. But the door stayed closed. Now, years later, I was outside again, not just emotionally, literally. Outside a restaurant window alone at a table I hadn't chosen, watching a version of family I no longer recognized. I picked up my fork and forced myself to taste the grilled peach salad in front of me. It was elegant, bitter, and strangely cold. My phone buzzed beneath the cloth napkin. I glanced down, careful not to draw attention, though no one was watching me. A single text from Lindsay, my general counsel at Kestrel Dynamics. Final signing in 2 hours. They want you there in person. I reread it then again, letting the meaning settle in. We'd been negotiating with Aeronautical Systems Group for 7 months. A $6 million defense contract that would give Kestrel a foothold in next-gen propulsion research. My team had spent weeks refining every clause, every supply timeline, every clause in the compliance packet. And now the department's R&D division was ready to sign on a Saturday night, no less. Oh, of course they were. Urgency and unpredictability had always been the currency in that world. I'd built my company around adapting to it. My name was on every patent that mattered. Kestrel didn't operate in glossy tech incubators or flashy IPO stages. We worked in cold labs and secured airfields where innovation happened quietly and on time. And still, not a single person at that table inside knew what I did for a living. I reached for my water glass and sipped slowly, letting the chill calm me. I had time. Barely. 2 hours. Charleston to Northridge would take 27 minutes by Air 15 if we flew low and direct. My pilot, Craig, was always on call for signings like this. We kept the jet fueled and waiting most weekends for this exact kind of moment. My mind shifted quickly into executive mode, running logistics, rerouting priorities, checking against variables. But then it stopped, paused, suspended in something quieter. Would anyone notice if I stood up now and left? Would it matter? I looked through the glass again. Madeline laughed at something Grayson said, her hand on his wrist. My seat, my real seat, had never been at that table. Maybe it never would be. But outside this patio, there was a table that was waiting for me. A deal. A room where my voice meant something. Where people stood when I entered. I slipped my phone back into my bag and signaled the waiter. I needed the check, and I needed it quickly. The patio light flickered once, then steadied. A breeze moved through the hedges, rustling just enough to remind me I was outside, not just metaphorically anymore. The chilled Bordeaux in front of me had started to warm in the glass, but I took a small sip anyway, letting it settle on my tongue before swallowing. It was excellent. Madeline always had good taste, especially when someone else was footing the bill. Through the glass, I could see the main dining room glowing gold with candlelight and soft chatter. Waiters moved with practiced elegance. In the center of it all, Madeline stood holding a glass of champagne. A small crowd had gathered around her, most seated, some leaning in as she spoke. She smiled with a kind of ease I remembered from her early 20s, the same calculated warmth that landed her every job she ever applied for. Grayson was beside her, nodding. Someone clinked a glass. A toast. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read enough in their faces. Someone made a joke, and the table erupted in laughter. Madeline gave a modest shrug, pressed a hand to her chest, and took a delicate sip from her flute. Then she looked around, taking in the room, every face, every friend. Except mine. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was beyond the pain, obscured by a hedge and a pane of glass, watching my daughter-in-law be celebrated by the people she valued most. No one turned. No one gestured toward the window. No one said, "Where's Celeste?" until one of her friends leaned slightly toward Madeline, eyes glancing in my direction. A whisper, a flick of the hand. Madeline's gaze followed just briefly and then dismissed whatever was said with a smile. Her hand returned to Grayson's wrist. I reminded myself what Dr. Chan had said years ago in our third session. Stay dignified. Stay seen. Even when they won't look at you. So I sat straighter. Smoothed my napkin. Took another sip of the wine that wasn't worth its price, but was worth the moment. I'd told myself for years that being invisible didn't bother me anymore, that I'd outgrown the need to be acknowledged. But watching them toast her without once glancing in my direction, I realized I'd been lying. I folded my hands in my lap palms tight, steadying myself as the waiter returned with the check. I folded the receipt in half and tucked it into my clutch, pushing my chair back with as little sound as possible. A couple at the far end of the patio didn't look up. No one from inside turned. I stood, straightened my scarf, and walked toward the edge of the hedge wall where the light dimmed and the noise from the restaurant softened into something distant. I pulled out my phone and typed a single message. "Craig, I need pickup. What's the soonest you can land?" His reply came almost immediately. "Helicopter available in 20. Company car 5 minutes out. Need your go." I glanced back at the table one more time before turning fully toward the quiet of the street beyond. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, then moved with conviction. Proceed. Central Pier landing pad. Next, I opened my contacts and tapped Lindsay's name. No answer, but I didn't expect one this late. I left a voicemail. "Hi, it's Celeste. Tell the Air Corps team I'm en route. I'll be wheels down by 9:15. I'll review the last changes en route. Let them know I'm personally confirming the delivery schedule and final structure tonight." I ended the call, exhaling slowly as I slipped the phone back into my bag. The shift wasn't loud. It didn't crack open inside me like something cinematic. It was smaller, quieter. A slow, deliberate folding away of the part of me that still hoped someone inside that room would look up and notice I was leaving. I wasn't storming out. I wasn't flinging words or demands or drama behind me. I was simply going to where I was needed, to where I mattered. As I turned back toward the patio doors, I caught a glimpse of Grayson through the glass. He was mid-laugh, his hand around a glass of bourbon. His head tilted toward Madeline's. Whatever story she was telling had him completely. There wasn't a pause. Not even a flicker of attention in my direction. I stepped back into the darkness of the hedge line and began walking toward the street. I had made it halfway to the curb when I heard the soft click of heels behind me. Madeline's voice followed tight and too sweet. "Celeste, are you leaving already?" I turned slowly. She was standing just outside the patio doors, arms crossed over her gold dress, the perfect image of concern dressed in courtesy. Grayson was a few steps behind her phone, in hand, brow furrowed like he'd just remembered I existed. "It's getting late," I said evenly, "and I have something more important to attend to." Madeline offered a smile, the kind that meant nothing. "We hadn't even gotten to cake. You'd have had to bring it outside," I replied, glancing at the empty table behind me. "Though I suppose there wouldn't have been enough forks." Grayson stepped forward, his tone clipped. "Mom, this is Madeline's big night. Can't you just—" He stopped looking for the word. "Stay seated," I offered, tilting my head. "Quiet." Grateful to be invited, even if only to the hedge, he flinched just slightly. It wasn't intentional. The restaurant was crowded. "We didn't think—" "No," I said gently. "You didn't." Madeline stiffened. "Look, if you felt—" "Don't worry," I interrupted, voice calm. "I'm not angry, not even hurt really, just clear." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the scarf box. "This is for you." I handed it to her, light as air. "It's from Florence. I thought of you when I saw it. Thought maybe we were turning a corner." She took it with both hands, clearly unsure whether to thank me or apologize. Neither came. I turned to Grayson. "I have a flight waiting. We're finalizing a contract tonight, government aviation strategic defense. Not exactly dinner conversation." He blinked. "You're still doing that work. I run the company now," I said. "We're negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal and they asked for me. Personally." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I waited a beat, just long enough to let the silence settle. "You two enjoy the rest of your evening," I said, stepping back toward the sidewalk. The breeze really was lovely. The night air was cooler by the water, a soft wind brushing past as I made my way down East Bay Street. The sidewalk shimmered faintly under the streetlights, the city moving in its quiet rhythm, oblivious to anything I had left behind. I walked without rush, the tap of my heels steady the weight of the moment, lightening with each step. Ahead, the small park near the pier came into view, already sectioned off with subtle security tape. A few pedestrians lingered near the edges, their conversations soft and curious. Then the sound began low at first, then unmistakable, the chop of rotor blades slicing the stillness open. The helicopter appeared like a shadow, pulling itself into shape, sleek and sure, the deep blue of the Kestrel logo catching the light as it descended. It hovered just long enough to stir the leaves and draw every eye nearby. A few phones were raised. Someone pointed. I kept walking. From the corner of my vision, I could see the windows of La Fourchette glowing just above the trees. Faces pressed to the glass. Silhouettes paused mid-toast, their expressions unreadable from this distance. But I knew what they were seeing. I knew what it meant. I stepped through the cordon where Craig was already waiting, headset in place. He gave a small nod. I returned it, wordless, and climbed into the cabin as the wind kicked at my scarf, twisting it briefly into the air before I caught it with one hand and pulled the door shut behind me. The rotor lifted us smooth and fast. The restaurant fell away below, just another square of golden light, now distant and sealed. I didn't look back again. I didn't need to. The cabin lights were dimmed, but the documents on the tablet in my lap glowed clear. Lindsay, patched in by secure line, walked me through the final clause as the helicopter leveled out above the harbor. My assistant Jenna handed me a stylus. "Everything's in place," she said. Just needs your sign-off. I scanned the amended terms. Payment schedule adjusted, licensing language tightened, global rights confirmed. 2 years of execution, 6 million secured, and a pathway to expansion. I initialed the final box, tapped my signature at the bottom, and handed it back without ceremony. Done, I said. On the other end of the call, Lindsay exhaled. You saved this deal. They were going to walk if you didn't show. I leaned back, letting the quiet fill the space. Saved it, not with shouting or spectacle, but by being exactly who I've always been, prepared, precise, steady. The kind of presence people trust when it matters most. Outside the city, lights stretched toward the horizon, and the noise of the restaurant faded into something distant and irrelevant. I closed my eyes briefly, not to rest, but to mark the shift. This was the room where I belonged now. The next evening, my dining room was full, not with relatives, but with people who had shown up for every late-night pivot and early morning launch. My CTO brought wine, Jenna made her lemon tart, and my goddaughter Ava set the table with mismatched plates and too many candles. We ate roasted chicken and talked shop between sips of Pinot Noir, laughing louder than I'd expected to. No one asked about the restaurant or the scarf, or why my son hadn't called. They didn't need to. This wasn't the kind of gathering where people earned their place by proximity. This was a table built on purpose, not obligation. Midway through the second course, I raised my glass. To people who make room for you without checking the guest list first, I said. The clink of glasses filled the room, soft but certain. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative, but it was the first time in a long while I'd toasted without trying to prove something. Later, as the laughter faded and coats were gathered, Ava stayed behind to help with dishes. She leaned on the counter watching me dry a glass and said, "You look lighter." I smiled because I felt it. A week later, between back-to-back meetings and a final review of the quarterly roadmap, I opened my inbox and saw 2 familiar names. Madeline's message was brief. "The girls haven't stopped talking about that helicopter. I had no idea you were that." No punctuation, just the trailing edge of surprise. Beneath it, Grayson had written, "We should talk sometime." I stared at the screen for a moment, fingers resting on the keyboard. There was no anger, no satisfaction, not even the faint sting of delayed recognition. Just stillness, like watching dust settle after a long storm. I didn't respond. Instead, I closed the laptop, stood and walked down the hall toward the conference room. My team was already seated, charts up, models glowing against the far wall. Jenna nodded as I entered. Gregory, my CFO, made room at the head of the table without needing to be asked. I took my seat and looked around. These were the people who saw me without being surprised, who followed not because of a title, but because of trust earned in long hours and quiet decisions. I didn't leave the table. I built a new one, and it flies.